Mismatched points, ugh, personally I loathe them. If you love them, this is not the video for you, but if you want to have less of that and more of a perfect seam matching like that, then this is definitely the video for you. Who am I? I am Kim. This is Quilt with Kim. You, my lovely, are very, very welcome. Let's go sort out these points right now and forever. You will love me by the end of this video, I promise. The first thing that you want to be watching out for to get your perfect seams is your stitch length. Now, if you have a longer stitch length, like 2.5, for example, 2.5, which is a standard stitch length on your machine, your seam can open really easily at either end, and that doesn't help your seam matching. So if you look, if I just open this, you can see already that without any pulling, that seam is coming apart. And if you're stitching your blocks together, for example, and they haven't matched, and then you're unpicking it, the more you do that, the more this seam will open. So we want to be starting with nice small stitch lengths, and that'll help you, or help your seam stay together. The other thing, whilst we're on the subject of stitching, is to make sure that you start off the fabric, not on the fabric. How do we do that? I'll show you when we're under the machine in just a second. But you can see what's happened here. I've started the stitching line a little bit down into the fabric. And you see that if I hold it up, you can see at the top, let's just move that out of the way. It's like an operation, this. You can see at the top, there's a little gap at the top of my stitch line and the edge of my fabric, and that doesn't help the integrity, if you like, of your stitch line or your seam line, and it can really make it open up very, very easily. And then when you're trying to match the seam, that doesn't help you at all. So we need to eradicate that. So let's get some fabric under the machine so I can show you those first couple of steps to getting perfect seams. First up, where have I got my settings then? So on my machine, my stitch width is set at 5.5. That's the position I know gives me a perfect 1/4 inch seam. And then over here, we can see that we've got a stitch length of 1.8. So if your machine only goes down to 2, go to 2, but if your machine will go down a little bit further, try and get to 1.8, because that's a really good, nice tight stitch for our piecing, and that stops our seams coming apart. So this is what I mean by just a little leader piece of fabric. It's just a scrap of fabric, that's all it is, and you can see this is very well used. And what I do is I start stitching on this. So my machine is set up, ready to go, and I'm going to drop the needle, find my foot pedal, which always disappears at the inappropriate moment, start stitching. And then you can see this little leader fabric is nearly to the needle, but not quite. Let me try and get right in there so that you can see. I've zoomed in as far as I can, but it's about just over 1/4 inch in front of the needle. And it's still underneath the presser foot, and you can just see the feed dogs peeking out a little bit, but don't worry too much about that. So let's get that back into position. So with our leader fabric, it doesn't matter where it is, we're literally just starting to stitch on it. So we can see that there's fabric either sides of our foot. That's fine. I'm not trying to stitch a 1/4 inch seam on this. I'm just getting the stitch line going so that I can continue onto the fabric I want. So this is the block or the 2 pieces of fabric that I want to stitch together. So what I'm going to do is, before I start stitching again, is to offer, so these are the 2 fabrics, there's purple and yellow here. I've got them all lined up, and I'm going to get it into position underneath the foot. You can just slide it underneath. You'll find there's a point that it stops naturally, and make sure your raw edge is against the raw edge of your foot, which in my case I know gives me a 1/4 inch seam. If you've got a 1/4 inch foot on, you put that raw edge against the edge of your foot. If I am happy with that, I'm going to start stitching, go slow, and you will feel the machine take it. You don't need to push it. It's almost like you're offering it to your machine, and you'll feel the feed dog start to take it and feed it through. So let your machine do the work. Your job is to guide it underneath, and It's okay if your needle is stitching on nothingness for a few stitches just in between the two bits of fabric, but you'll find that what happens next is that it catches your fabric that you want, and then we can carefully stitch our 1/4 inch seam all the way down here until the ends. And then when we come off the end, what I would do is chain piece. I've got a video on chain piecing, which I'll pop down in the description below, and I'll pop it up at the end as well. But when we chain stitch, we'd be offering the next block up or the next couple of pieces of fabric up, and we would pretty much be doing the same thing. So it would come off this set of fabric and onto our new set of fabric. So you always have a continuous line and you're stitching right over the edges of your fabric. So let's take that off. I am going to take this off for the purposes of speed to show you. I am happy with that. So can we see here, we've got our nice stitch line, which is a nice neat 1.8 millimeter. We've got a little blip in the middle where I stopped to talk to you. We've got a thread line coming off the end, but we know that that's now attached. The two edges are firmly attached together. And then just at this end where our leader is, all I would do is snip that leader off. Let me move camera so I can show you properly. Okay, let's get that there. So that's all I'm doing, snipping that off. Now, the next thing that we need to worry about, so we've done stages 1 and 2. We've got a nice small stitch length, and we've stitched right off the edges of our fabric, so that seam isn't going to come open. So the next thing is our pressing, because that's important as well in helping us to seam match. Now, we've got a rule in Patchwork to always press to the dark side, and we want to make sure that that is beautifully pressed. So let me get my iron and show you how to do that. So this is my very temporary ironing board. And one of these days I am going to surprise everybody, and I'm going to have a proper little ironing board underneath my camera, and you'll all fall over at that. So if you're new here, it's a bit of a running joke because I seem to have had my temporary little ironing mat for ages and not ever managed to get a proper mat. But anyway, I digress. Now, before you think I'm ironing just on a towel on a cutting mat, I am not. Do not do that, because the heat will corrupt your cutting mat, and we do not want a corrupted cutting mat. Sorry, it will warp it, not corrupt it. But in here, I've got loads and loads of insulated wadding to protect my cutting mat. Even then, I don't do this for very long. So we want to make sure that this seam is nicely pressed to our dark side. So it doesn't really matter which side you start. You can start on this side if you like, on the right side. Let me show you that. Get all this fluff out of the way. When I start on the right side, what I want to do is make sure this seam is going off away from me. So I lift up that dark fabric, and then with a hot iron I am pressing into that seam and pressing away. And we really want to make sure that the ends are pressed. Let me turn that over and do the other side. So what we want to end up with is a very nicely pressed seam, but pay particular attention to the ends, because it's very easy to concentrate on the middle and think, oh, that looks marvelous, but then not worry about the ends. And it's the ends that matter when we are seam matching. So really spend a little bit of time. So give it a little tug. So I've got my iron on my yellow fabric in this instance, and I'm pulling my purple fabric away just gently so that I can get into that seam to make sure it is nice and crisp. And we'll do this on the other end as well. So the flatter and crisper those ends are, the easier your seam matching will be. Let me just do the other one that it's going to get joined up to, because I prepared this earlier. Okay, so that's the pressing. That's stage 3. You want really good pressing. Then we need to get to the next stage, which is where we do our magic bit of matching. Now, there's a little trick that I use, so let me show you how to do this. So first of all, we're going to put right sides together. That is nothing unusual about that. The next thing we are going to nest those seams. What does that mean? It means, can you see we've got the fold here of our seam just there, and we've got this fold here. Those folds butt up against one another. So we are matching them and we're butting them up. I like roll them up, and we want to make sure that those ends match at the top. Mine doesn't, so I'm going to spend just a second getting into position a bit easier. Let's do this a little bit further away from me so that I can see. So can you see I've butted it up here? And if I roll it up, you can see that that seam is matching beautifully. And I can massage it a little bit into place, and we can see here that those edges are butted up, so that purple is making a continuous line, and you'll be able to see if you've got any gap in the middle. If I am happy, let's take a couple of seconds just to get some repositioning. If you are happy, hold on to that seam with dear life. Next stage is we're going to need some pins, and I am moving my thumbs around, but I'm not letting go of the grip or letting go of my grip. I'm going to put a pin in at that seam on the stitch line. I'm still not letting go. I'm going to get another pin, and I'm going to not stab my finger and not drop the fabric. I'll put another pin just next to it, and then I'll put another pin the other side, so that seam is held into place. Now I can breathe, even though I did prick myself and drop it. And here's where the little magic happens. So we're going to get under the machine, but we're not going to stitch it all the way down. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will say, you've changed your pins. Yes, I have, because I noticed it wasn't actually lining up properly. This is the downside of trying to do all this fine work with the camera in the way. So I hope you'll forgive me that I did a little bit of a readjustment off camera, but I've done the same thing. I've got my seams nested and I've pinned that seam into place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stitching about an inch either side, or I'm going to stitch about 1.5 inches over that seam. I've got the edge of my fabric against the edge of the foot because this is going to be less than 1/4 inch. That is fine. And I'm going to stitch slowly. Now, don't please put comments below to say it is dangerous to stitch over pins. Yes, I know it's dangerous to stitch over the pins. However, we are stitching really slowly. If you stitch slowly over pins, the needle will slide off the pin. If you are stitching speedily, then your likelihood is that your needle will hit a pin and everything will go flying. But we're not doing that. We're going really, really slowly. So that's what I want you to do. Always think safety first. And we've got such a big stitch length as well that you're very likely to miss your pins by a country mile. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do is stitch that 1.5 inches. And what you'll see now is I've got a basted stitch just there. Can you see that? Now, that serves a couple of purposes, because we're going to do a grand reveal in a minute. I have no idea whether this is going to work or not. Well, it's kind of live. It's not quite live, but I'm doing this as I'm doing it with you. I have no idea whether it's going to match. But if it doesn't match, it is really easy to take out those basting stitches, repin and baste again. But if you've stitched all the way along in your 1.8 stitch length and it's missed, that is a nightmare to unpick, as you probably know. So let's see if this has worked. I'm going to take the pins out and open it up. Can you do a drum roll? I've probably got a drum roll sound effect on here somewhere, but I can't. My laptop that's recording this is like right over there and I can't see that far. So grand reveal. Oh, nearly pulled it out. I will take that. Look at that. Look at that. Da, da, da. Perfect match seams. Now you will see here you've got little pinholes. Don't worry about those. They will press out very easily. So what I do next is I fold that back up, get it all into position. I do not take out that basting. What I do is get my machine back to its proper settings again. So let's just do that. So it's back to 5.5 and then I'm going back down to 1.8. I'm going to start with my lead fabric again. Let's drop the needle and get this lined up. Make sure your edges all line up. And we start stitching. Another little trick whilst we're here. Can you see there's a little yellow budging out underneath the purple? I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is put my hand underneath here. And I'm just going to gently with my fingers give it a little tug to pull it into position. Sorry, I'm knocking everything flying. So we're just going to do that. And then all I need to do is stitch down. Now we're coming up to the seam, so I'm going to stop a second, make sure that everything is lined up on the second half and get it all straight up again. We're going to go over that seam and then the same thing again all the way down right to the end. And I do come off because if we need to be seam matching here for whatever reason, we need the same thing to happen. And then if I open it up, let's get it off the machine and under the camera. So we'll open it up and there we have one beautifully matched seam in the middle. Go me! Now, doing it this way is pretty foolproof. Yes, you will miss the odd one. They do still happen, but this really cuts down the amount of missed points and increases your ability to get perfect points and seam matching in the middle of your blocks. I will, of course, cut that off. We don't want that there. Once you've pressed, that'll all look beautiful. So I hope that has helped. If it has, please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I would love you and leave you for now, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.